It was July of 1518 when residents of Strasbourg were struck by a sudden and seemingly uncontrollable urge to dance. The hysteria ticked off when a woman known as Frau Trophia stepped into the street and silently started to twirl, twist and shake. She kept her solo dance marathon, or should I say dance-a-thon, for nearly a week, and before long, some 3 dozen other Strasbourgeois had joined in. By August, the dancing epidemic had claimed as many as 400 victims with no explanation for the phenomenon. So the question is, why all those people dance to death? Local physicians blamed it on hot blood and suggested the afflicted simply gyrate the fever away. A stage was constructed and professional dancers were brought in. The town even hired a band to provide backing music, but it wasn't long before the marathon started to take its toll. Many dancers collapsed from sheer exhaustion. Some even died from strokes and heart attacks. The Strasbourg dancing plague might sound like a kid's story, stuff of legend, but it is well documented on 16th century historical records. This is not the only known incident of this kind. Similar manias took place in Germany, Switzerland and the Netherlands, but none of them was as large or as deadly to the events of 1518. But what is this that have led so many people to dance themselves to death? According to historian John Waller, the explanation most likely concerns St. Vitus, a Catholic saint who was believed to hold power to curse people with a dancing plague. When combined with the horrors of disease and famine, both of which were tearing through Strasbourg along with other places in Europe in 1518, the St. Vitus superstition may have triggered a stress-induced hysteria that took hold of much of the city. For centuries, this bizarre event, known variously as the dancing epidemic of 1518, has stumped scientists attempting to find a cause for this mindless, intense and ultimately deadly dance. Historian John Waller, author of the book A Time to Dance, A Time to Die, The Extraordinary Story of the Dancing Plague of 1518, studied the illness at length and has solved the mystery. He explained that the event took place is undisputed, and historical records documenting the dancing deaths, such as physician notes, cathedral sermons, local and regional chronicles, and even notes issued by the Strasbourg City Council during the height of the boogieing rage, all were unambiguous on the fact that the victims indeed danced. These people were not just trembling or shaking or convulsing. Even though they were entranced, their arms and legs were moving as if they were purposely dancing. One theory for the main cause may lie upon a biological or chemical origin for the dancing mania. Experts believe the most likely explanation was ergot, a mold that grows on the stalks of damp rye. When consumed unknowingly in bread, the mold can trigger violent convulsion and delusions but not coordinated movements that last for days. Ergot is a compound like LSD, and it is most likely that it gave illusions to people, not energy to dance. Another theory suggests that the dancers were performing an ecstatic ritual of a heretical sect, but there were no evidence that the dancers wanted to dance. On the contrary, they expressed fear and depression according to written accounts. One third theory, though, is based on psychological trauma, which resulted effects on the human body. A series of famines resulting from bitter cold winters, scorching summers, sudden crop frosts and terrifying hailstorms preceded the maniacal dancing. Waves of death followed from malnutrition, lack of food. People who survived were often forced to slaughter all their farm animals, selling them to secure loans, and finally take on the streets, begging. It was a very hard time for them. Smallpox, syphilis, leprosy, and a new disease called the English sweat swept through the areas. Anxiety and false fears gripped the region. Since at least 300 BCE, plagues of Coro, an irrational male fear that one's genitals have been stolen or are fatally shrinking into the body, have swept through various parts of the world, particularly throughout Africa and Asia. Most recently, a 1967 outbreak documented in the Singapore Medical Journal caused over 1,000 men to use pegs and clamps in hopes of protecting themselves from the gripping fear. In both cases, cultural issues occur, impacting on collective behavior. Victims often go into an involuntary trance state, fueled by psychological stress and the expectation of succumbing to an altered state. So trance, like yawning, can be highly contagious. At least 7 other outbreaks of the dancing epidemic occurred in medieval Europe, mostly in the areas surrounding Strasbourg. Of course, this is no coincidence. In more recent history, a major outbreak occurred in Madagascar in the 1840s, when people were described to dance wildly, in a state of trance. They believed that they were possessed by spirits. Perhaps the most unusual documented case of mass psychogenic illness was the Tanganyika laughter epidemic of 1962. A paper published the following year in the Central African Journal of Medicine described what happened. It was triggered by a simple joke among students in a boarding school in Tanzania. Young girls started laughing uncontrollably. At first there were spurts of laugh, but then this extended to hours of laughing, and then days. The victims, virtually all female, suffered pain, fainting, respiratory problems, rashes, and crying attacks, all related to the hysterical laughter, proving the old adage that laughter can be contagious. And by saying contagious, I mean literally contagious. The epidemic passed from students to their parents, as well as to other schools and surrounding villages. This epidemic took 1.5 years to end. Epidemics can be uncontrollable. Either it is a laughing or a dancing epidemic, it can get out of hand. Take into account today, our pandemic. After all those historical data and the measures against it, we still struggle to control it. Stay safe, and as always, thanks for watching.